This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr. Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by 6 Hour. My guest today is Andy McNabb. Andy is a former British SAS soldier who led Bravo 20 during the first Gulf War. He was captured, tortured for 3 weeks before his eventual release. He wrote about that experience in a book called Bravo 20, which is one of, if not the best-selling memoirs of modern warfare ever written. He followed that up with Immediate Action and then 7 Troop, and is now the author of over 30 different books. He also helps out consulting in Hollywood, to include the Michael Mann robbery heist film, Heat. Amazing guy, fascinating individual. It was such an honor to talk to him. So now, without further ado, Andy McNabb. I mean, I don't even know where to start with you because I feel like I know you from all the books that I've read and from just diving into Bravo 20 when I was a young SEAL. Everybody was reading it back then. This is the late 90s when I came in, and there were very few books on modern warfare out there that we could study. Most everything, as you know, is from Vietnam that we had to look back on at that point. So we just dove into this, and we had so much respect for you guys and everything that you went through. And then since, I mean, you've been an inspiration from when you left the military up until today as well, not just for me, but for so many people making that transition from military service. But I'd like to start with your beginning, because most people that are dropped off on the step of, like as you were, that's a very auspicious beginning. That's a tough way to start out. So from that point up until you joined the military, can you give us a little bit of a background on what that was like? Because you joined at 16, is that correct?
I did, yeah. I joined what was then it's called junior service. So basically, you can join the British Army at 16. You can't go on operations until you're 18. But I was in a children's home till I was about 5. And then I went into a house with parents, and was eventually adopted by them. And basically, I just lived in the equivalent, I suppose, of United States big project housing. We call them council housing, social housing. And I had I thought it was a great time, because I didn't like school. Even now, when I go into schools and talk to sort of pupils about the value of education, to me, it's still, even new schools smell like boiled cabbage and old floor polish. I just didn't like schools, and just done, just too much freedom, quite frankly. And then, as I was getting older, basically what I wanted was money, but without understanding that you needed to get an education and a decent job to get the money. So I landed up in juvenile detention when I was just turning. I was sort of just on 15, 16. And at that time in the UK, we had a system called the Borstal system. And it was all about what was called the short, sharp shock. And that was sort of putting, 16, 17-year-old kids into these institutions. And the theory was to give them such a hard time, it would deter them from reoffending. System didn't work. It was rubbish, and it was all dissolved in the sort of, I think it was about the mid 80s, because there was no education, rehabilitation. So a lot of groups to do with social mobility in the UK were lobbying the government and say, look, we've got to do something about this. So they were, people were then allowed to come into the bookstores and talk about opportunities, and one of those was the army. So literally, I joined the army thinking I was going to be a helicopter pilot, because that was the film that we saw, the recruiting film. I thought that'd be great. It was like this little 2-seater helicopter, and he was flying over the beaches in Cyprus, this guy. Yeah. And he's waving at the girls, the girls are waving at him. I didn't have a clue where Cyprus was, but it didn't matter. I thought, great, I'm gonna have some of this army business. Because the deal was, if you got selected to join the military, you done like a 3-day selection, to see if all your limbs are working, I suppose, If you got a place in the army, then you didn't go back to the borstal. You went home and waited for your acceptance date. So it was as simple as that. I thought, well, I'll join the army, get out of the borstal, because the system was the short, sharp shock. Really was. It was quite a sort of tough regime.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll get into the army and just see what happened. So I landed up. Not as a helicopter pilot, but there was, they weren't going to let me get close enough to spit at one of those things. Let alone fly one. It was like,
they knew what they were doing. Yeah, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, exactly. They knew. And I was given a place in the infantry, and you know what? I didn't even really know what they'd done. It was just the fact of getting out of Borstal, and so I joined what was called an infantry junior leaders battalion. So in the Brit Army, you do 28 weeks basic training before you then do your continuation training, whatever you are, whether you're an infantry guy or you're a trades guy. But if you joined as in the junior leaders battalion, what they do, they give you a year's training. And the idea is so you do all your normal basic 28 weeks, but within that year as well, what they're trying to do is get you ready to become the future NCOs of the infantry.
Okay.
And I didn't like it, quite frankly, when I got there. It was worse than the Borstal. But the system works, and even now within junior service, if you're looking at the NCO sort of cadre within certainly the infantry, they tend to be the people who have joined as 16-year-olds, and they've got that extra sort of year of training.
Got it. And did you know about the SAS at this point? Because this is before Princess Gate. This is before they really hit the world stage, and all those photos went out, with the MP5s and the whole deal. Did you hear about them yet? Did you know about them, or were you?
I didn't really know about them until I was 18, and I was in the battalion. And the war of choice at that stage was the conflict in Northern Ireland. Yeah. So we used to do these things called emergency tours every year, which were 4 to 5 months, no more than 5 months a year. And what was known as a regiment, Special Air Service, within the environment, it's just simply called the regiment. So you'd have these lads turn up, and they're talking long hair, and they're driving civilian cars, and all, they've got weapons hanging off them everywhere. So we weren't allowed to speak to them, but I knew they existed, and they would come in. You'd see them now and again. They would disappear, and they'd go and they were doing a lot of ambushes around the border area between the Free State and Northern Ireland, and so I sort of knew of them, but in those early days, it really didn't sort of enter my sort of thought process of thinking, well, I'll ever become one of them, because the whole sort of military was full of the horror stories of the selection process and all that sort of stuff. So I was aware of them. I didn't speak to them. I would just see them now and again during these tours.
Got it. And that's yours, the Royal Green Jackets? Is that who you're with at that time?
Green Jackets, yeah, which was a light infantry regiment.
Got it. And for people that are listening, this is 77, 78. So this is this is like the troubles. Like, this is serious.
77, Christmas. Yeah, Christmas, this is literally day after my 18th birthday.
Wow. That's incredible. You go up there, and this is not just going up to stand a post somewhere. I mean, you guys are
no. Basically, there was we were working, we would live in what was called submarines, which were these concrete bunkers, big, long bunkers, because of obviously taking mortar fire all the time. So we'd live in submarines on these sort of 4 layers of bunk beds, either side. Everything had to be in the bunk bed. And literally you'd be doing urban patrols. And during the daytime, urban patrols, trying to dominate the area around the border in an area called South Armagh. And then lay ambushes at night, or you would be on the town patrol in the base, which is called Crossmaglen, where the town where we were based. And we would have to do our local protection patrols, because obviously the vans would be coming in, the trucks would be coming in with the mortar base plates on. So we had to try and push out that perimeter. So we'd the fire in the mortars, which were homemade mortars, so they hopefully made out of sort of gas cylinders. The further we can push them out, the less accurate they would be. So so we're taking casualties. Our commanding officer got shot down in his helicopter. There was no vehicles that went outside the town during that period of the war, sort of up to then until maybe 10 years later, because they were always getting IED'd. So
I was going to ask about that. That was your first experience with IEDs.
Yeah, as a 16-year-old, 18-year-old. Yeah.
Man, was that, did you get training as far as that went, or did you just get thrown right into the
Yeah,
mix and
you
have to
get
figure it out?
yeah. Well, basically, what happened? The 2 years before that, there were so many. Up until then, 17-year-olds. If you was in an infantry battalion, you were going over to Northern Ireland. So, but there was a disproportionate amount of 17-year-olds that were getting killed. So that's when they changed it, obviously, to you have to be 18, and then implemented Northern Ireland training. So you'd go away, and it took about sort of it was a 3-month module of doing all the different requirements that are needed to go wherever you were in Northern Ireland. So if you went to Belfast, obviously it'd be all urban. If you go to South Armagh, it'd be a mixture of urban and rural. So, and there was that more or less a duty of care stuff, basically, to get, if you like, the training package. So if you was doing a 5-month tour every year or 4-month tour every year, we literally come back, have leave, go and do some of the normal exercises that you would do, infantry, defense exercises, digging trenches, all that sort of stuff. And then we get ready for the next package. So you do the next package and then go and do another tour. But as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, I thought it was all right because you save so much money. And you sort of get back to the garrison town where we lived, and all the second-hand car dealers are ready, rubbing their hands. Yeah.
Same thing here in the United States.
Yeah. Exactly.
Outside of every base, and we got a deal for you. Yeah.
You got a deal for you. You'd buy it, you'd crash it, someone would steal it or whatever. But then you would then go on another tour and come back and do exactly the same. It's like, it was crazy. It was crazy. Save all this money up and then go and give it to some other guy, for a heap of a car.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then I think your first time, or one of these deployments up there, one of your good friends got killed by an IED. Is that right? Removing a flag.
Yes. Yeah. It was it was my very first tour in Crossmaglen. So I was 18, and what happened was that the lots of different ways of putting IEDs out. It was obviously the conventional IEDs, the roadside bombs, all that sort of stuff. But what happened in this particular circumstance, there was a lot of tricolours were hung up around the outskirts of Crossmaglen. So the policy at that time was to take them down. So what happened, there was within the wooden stake where the tricolour was hanging off a telegraph pole, there was a mercury switch in it. And there was probably about sort of a pound and a half of high explosives. They used Eastern Bloc Semtex at that stage. So as the guy called Nicky Smith, he was on top of an armoured vehicle called it's a Saracen. We used to call them cans, So they had these 2 cans that would be in the town itself. So he got onto the can and checked it to pull it down. So obviously, as he pulled it, the mercury switch tilted, and the whole thing detonated. And for me, it was the first time that it sort of hit home that actually it was real, rather than saving up the money to get a second-hand car. It was real, So it took about 2 days to find his foot. That sort of visceral stuff,
Yeah.
And I thought, oh yeah, all people do get killed. And that was the first casualty of that tour as well. And as we were taking what was left of him, we put him we had these poncho stretchers with us, and we're running through the town, and everyone's out cheering. And I thought, well, it's not all about the saving the money. People do get killed.
Oh. And do you remember at 18 years old, did you have any sense of how you guys were getting intelligence, or who was running sources, or were you targeting people with target packages like we would do later on? What was that kind of intelligence cycle? What did that look like as far as targeting leadership up there, and then your involvement in that at such a young age?
Yeah, it was basically, we were, obviously at the bottom of the food chain as a young infantry soldier, but basically what we would have is there'd be 2 lots of information that was coming in. It was technical information, and they would go, well, this is teching. Whether it's to do with conversations and telephone calls, all that sort of stuff, and then human int, which would be sources. Yeah. So they would say, right, tech int says this, human int says that. We had no idea where that human intelligence was coming from, but we knew that it was out there. We knew that there were groups out there that were trying to recruit sources within the terrorist cell networks. They work very much, like French resistance, Al Qaeda, in the cell system. So, if you've got 4 or 6 guys working, they not everybody knows where the weapons are. Not everybody knows what exactly the job is. So if you pick one of those guys out of the cell system, he's only got a certain amount of information that he knows. And certainly these organizations are very good at that. And once I got in the regiment and started doing undercover work in Ireland, I found myself, that was our sort of most important thing, was trying to get those sources, to drag them out of those ASUs and coerce them to become a source.
It's incredible. And then at what point do you learn more about the SAS and selection process, and then walk into that office and get a date to go and try out? How did that work?
Yeah. It really started like everybody else. So, there was a big snooker final. At that stage, the UK was mad about snooker, and there was a big snooker final going on. And all of a sudden it cut, and then you've got all these guys running around, the Iranian embassy. And obviously, boom, the regiment came on to the big screen. And there was a guy who was running along. He was checking under the cars. He was in civilian clothes. And he was from our battalion. And it was called Ned. We used to call him Ned Belly because he used to have one. He didn't have one now. So we go, oh, well, that's Ned. So clearly we knew that he'd done selection and gone in there. It was a regiment. So like everybody else, the interest then started to form about the regiment, and obviously the people from my battalion that had tried selection have come back with their horror stories, and people that they've got in. And it was really when I became an infantry platoon sergeant in the battalion that I really thought about it. And it's just like it's like any other sort of profession, really. You look at it and you go, okay, right, well, I'm here, but what's the best place to be? Whether, I don't know, you could be a soldier, a carpenter, it doesn't matter. Where's the best place to be? Yeah. And for me, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try for the selection. And then, there's lots of sort of urban myths how it all works. You're specially selected. No, you're not. You go to your unit's administration office and you fill in a form and send it off. And they come back and go, yeah, okay, you can come to this selection. And that is as simple as that, 'cause it's all about self-motivation. So it's not as if you're selected. They say, okay, you turn up. And it's simple as that, really. And I thought, right, well, I better start preparing and getting the fitness training in, getting all the, what I hope was the mental preparation to pass the selection.
And then you did that the first time. And what happened that first time? You made it almost to the end, right? The first time?
Yeah. The selection process is the first month, and then there's the rest of it goes on for about another 6 months. But the first month is purely physical stamina, really. Mm-hmm. And it's a Bergen, a backpack, right. and it's what we call TABS, Tactical Advance to Battle. So it's over a mountain range in the west of the UK in Wales. And basically, every day you'll do a tab of between 15 and the longest one is 64 kilometres. Wow. With set weights between 35 pounds and 50 pounds. And you don't know how long the route is. You don't know what route it is. You get to a checkpoint. They go, where are you? You show them on the map. They say, all right, go to this 8-figure grid reference. You show them where it is on the map, and I say, well, get going. And off you go. So you don't know the cut-off time. So it's all about stamina and right. Self-motivation. So I got to the second to last day, and actually I was just too confident. I was too cocky. There was a one route called sketch map, where you're not using a map and a compass. You're just using what you've, sort of can remember and using your compass. And I knew the ground very well because of the training. So I took a shortcut through a forestry block, that I thought was a fire break, but it wasn't. What they basically have done, they've been cutting all the trees and they've been felled. So the shortcut become a long cut, and I was late on the timings. So you only get 2 goes on selection, because you might be, if you keep on reapplying, you might be taking the place of a candidate that does get through. Right. So and you can get invited back. So second to last day, I was off that first month. And I said, do you want to come back? And I went, yeah, absolutely. So I got an opportunity to get onto the next selection, which was sort of 6 months' time. And obviously that one finally made it through the 7 months. Normally, numbers wise, it's there's no more than the 220 at a push on each selection, and it's between 8 and 12 past the selection. In fact, in our selection, there was 8 that passed. The vast majority of people go in that first month. You know, the guys, I don't know, I think you're going to be James Bond or whatever it is. You know, you get a lot of those guys. They go in the first month, you get injuries, and then people like me have copped it up with too cocky. And then it's sort of on my selection, out of that 220, there was, after that first month, there was 24, and then that gradually went down to the final 8 after the 7 months.
Got it. And is part of that 7 months going to you go to Brunei, or you do the jungle side of things?
Yeah. You do a jungle phase where you spend a month under the canopy, and basically you're learning how to work in a small 4-man team in the way that special forces operate. So it's not so much as well as the, if you like, the stamina and the training itself, because everything's live ammunition. Mm-hmm. And there are casualties during this phase of training, as there are actually in the first month as well. It was only sort of 4 or 5 years ago that 2 guys died on that first month. But what it's all about is seeing if you can work in a small group, in a closed environment, with no leadership. You know, there's some fantastic soldiers out there, but they've got to be told what to do. If you say to a guy, right, go from here to here and don't stop, they'll do it. But maybe they won't be using their own initiative to do it. So it's trying to see if a small group can actually motivate each other, help each other in a quite harsh environment. I'd never been to the jungle before, so I had to sort of live like that, because you live tactically for a month. Yeah. And the annoying thing is the training team never tell you how good or bad you're doing.
Right.
And in fact, you don't know if you pass or fail until you get back to the UK. So it's all about best efforts, which is horrible, because you don't know. Right. You know, I thought I failed. You know, everybody thought I failed, really. But it's not until you get back. And the criteria is with the training team is, okay, would you have this man in your patrol? Because the reality is they come from the squadrons.
Right.
So, you know, it's not sort of too much of a leap to think that if you let somebody through the selection process, one day they might be in that guy's patrol.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not a pure democracy, but it's a democracy in a way that the training team go, if the majority say yes, they move through onto the next phase. Because the reality is you might be in their squadron, you might be in their patrol.
Right. And not knowing if you made it or not, that's such a psychological,
it's
so psychologically really crushing as you go through. It adds an entirely different element. I mean, in SEAL training, it's obvious, you know, you ring the bell and you're out, you know, it's pretty cut and clear. So there's not that psychological element of the unknown, like you guys have, which is pretty amazing.
So annoying. And the thing is, it's certainly if you do it on the jungle phase, it's not as if you're going anywhere.
Right.
It's even if there's a thing, VW, voluntary withdrawal, but it's not as if you go out in the jungle. You just sit there and wait for it.
You're there anyway.
So you might as well get on. Yeah.
Yeah. And then is it after that you do like a week or two of survival, evasion, resistance, escape, or the E&E? Is that right after that, or how does that work?
No, there's you come back from that, and then you'll do some modules. You'll do like a CQB, close quarter battle module with pistols, because the primary weapon of the regiment is the pistol. It's not, you know, the longs or, you know, all the heavy weapons, because of certainly of the covert nature of work that they do as well. So you do modules on pistol work in civilian clothes, which is all very exciting, because, you know, it's the first time, you know, sort of military guys get to do that. You do demolitions, medic training, because once you get into the squadron, you're on a year's probation, but you're straight. If the squadron are operational, you're operational. So you've got to have that baseline of, you know, demolitions, signals, and medical training. So you do those modules, and in fact, even during the weapon training modules, some people have been, you know, sort of taken off selection.
Right.
We had a Royal Marine corporal who was, you would expect would be really, really good, weapons, which he was, normal platoon weapons. He was great. But actually, as soon as he got onto other weapon systems, he was just taking too long to adapt. And, so the, training team said, well, it's like, you've got to be able to adapt quicker than you are. So it came off, whereas some trade guy, some, mechanic, in fact, who's been looking after tanks in Germany for like 3 years, could actually, just switch on and adapt and move on. So he stayed on the selection. So you do a lot of those modules. And then the very last big hurdle is the combat survival stage. And that's in 2 parts. That's what happens is that you do all the traditional stuff, where you're going out in the field and you're learning how to survive, all that sort of stuff, traps and shelters and all that sort of thing. And the other bit is the conduct under capture module, where you sit for about it's about a week, and everybody. A selection of people who've been held against their will, whether they're prisoners of war, political prisoners, kidnapped victims, for money, anybody who's been held, journalists would come in who've been held, where they've been reporting. And what they would talk about is their experiences. And you would, then you'd have a Q&A afterwards. And the idea was that if you listen to all these different people's experiences, if there's something, just a sentence that helps you if you're caught, because obviously, special forces, they're prone to capture troops, same as aircrew, so if there's something, just one thing that's going to help you when you're captured, it's worth sitting there for a week, listening to all these different people's experiences. And obviously for me, during the Bravo 20 experience, it worked very well indeed.
Interesting. I was going to ask you if you thought back to that time during Bravo 20, but I'll get to that in a second. But do you remember? I think they had somebody, a woman from the Special Operations Executive that jumped into France during World War II that came and talked to you guys and made an impression on you that and was captured. Absolutely. I don't know, right away maybe, but went through unspeakable torture.
Yeah, she was a young French woman living in London when war broke out, and she was a dressmaker. And SOE got hold of her, and they said, right, you're going to go back to France, and basically we just want you to blow up stuff. And she's gone, yeah, okay. She's 19. Wow. So she gets her training. She parachutes. They jumped her into Holland, and the idea was then she was going to get moved back into France. And she started operating and was caught, and it was something about 2 years of interrogation. She never broke out of her cover story. Constantly, obviously denying what she was doing, and then eventually landed up in a concentration camp, and then was liberated. And the thing that kept her going was the fact that her family was still in France. So if she gave up her real identity, would her then family be rounded up as well? So and the amazing thing, what she said, look, you can't do anything physically about what they want to do for you. Like, you can't, there's not a thing you can do because they control you. So you just got to accept that and get on with keeping that sort of an integrity of her mind, of your mind. And that's all you can do. And that certainly sort of stuck with me from this woman who now was, she was in her late 80s by then. And this was from by then, 20-year-old young French dressmaker. And then I heard exactly the same thing from an American Phantom pilot. He was a Navy pilot, and he had no hair, no teeth, no muscle mass, but he was still alive, this guy. And literally, he'd flown 77 missions off of the aircraft carrier he was based on. Does 80 missions, and that's the end of his tour. 77th mission, he got shot down. Spent 5 years in solitary confinement in Vietnam. Every major bone in his body had been broken. He had to self-heal. He had no muscle mass on his buttocks because it was just continuously sort of beaten. out of him by a frayed bamboo. And he said exactly the same. He said, look, there's nothing I could do. He says, look, I was a Marine. I was, when they first sort of, started to sort of get hold of me and in effect beat me up, I would fight back. And said, I really, really quickly learned that if there's two of them and you do that, well, they'll bring four guys in next time. So just accept it. And this guy accepted what happened to him physically, just tried to minimize the damage, but he kept the integrity of his brain. And for him, his motivation was wanting to get back to see his child. And he built a house. Mentally, he built this house, and he had so much time. He redecorated it and he rewired it, and he'd done all the, and he said, I didn't have a clue about house building, but it didn't matter. I just, done this process. His motivation was getting back to see his family. Wow. And it works, well, then he was living in Hawaii, and, there was like loads of, crystals hanging from his ceiling. He'd found Buddha and all that sort of stuff. But so what? He was alive. So what?
Wow. And did you think back on that training years later when you were captured in Iraq? Did you think back to those people talking and what they went through, and how did that training and what those stories impact you then?
Yeah, very much so. And it was that point, coming from the SOE woman and from the Phantom pilot, is that you just accept it. It's, within life, everybody else is to blame. If something misfortune happens to you, we live in a culture where somebody else is to blame, and it's not your fault, and it's a system or an individual's fault. But the fact is, it doesn't change anything. If you're captured, you're in Baghdad, you're in an interrogation center. Well, you can blame whoever you want. Nothing's going to change that. So that's why I think that certainly the resistance to interrogation training was really, really helpful, because it just thought of those two people. In fact, you just got to accept it and really just keep that integrity of the brain. Obviously, when people are captured, there's still a job to do. You've got to retain that information to give, obviously, the headquarter element time to, readjust. Say, well, we haven't heard anything from Bravo 20. What does that mean? Well, the worst case scenario is everybody's captured and they're saying everything that they know. So how do we then minimize the risk to the other guys on the ground? So your job is to give that window of opportunity. And that really comes from, the operational security at the beginning of it, of any operation, where you're only told what you need to know. So if this situation does happen, even if you do blurt out everything you know, you can minimize it. So the headquarter element can look at it and go, this is what they know. Because as we plan and prepare, we go into isolation. So nobody knows what we're doing. We don't know what anybody else is doing. This is what they know. What can we change and adapt? So there's still a job to do, which is a big motivation. Because obviously the regiment's quite a small organization. And so I had friends in other squadrons that were out in the Western Desert, still out there looking for scuds. And I'm the godfather to their kids, all that sort of stuff. All that stuff happens. So there's a motivation, not to blurt out what you know, and to understand you've still got a job to do.
Incredible. And so before 1990, 1991, you get to your squadron and you go right to an air squadron. Is that how you do it?
Yeah. There's 4 squadrons, and then in each squadron there's 4 troops. So there's an air assault troop, there's a boat troop, mounting troop, mobility troop. Basically, they're entry skills. How you can get people into the theatre of operations. So I come from a regular sort of light infantry regiment, so I wasn't parachute trained. So I had to go away and do the basic static line jump course, and then got onto the military freefall, the Halo and military insertion, jumping at 20. Well, anything now going up now is 24,000 up to 32,000 feet now, and you jump out with the loads and all that sort of stuff. So, which I found quite exciting, actually. I thought that was a really exciting thing to do, and still do it now as a sport.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's great. It's really enjoy it. But so that was very exciting, joining the Sabre Squadron into an air assault troop. And then really, I got badged on a Tuesday where, you become a member of the squadron. And the squadron were already out on operations in Southeast Asia. So I went out on the Thursday back into the jungle for about another 6 weeks. But without realizing it, it was a really good opportunity because of the squadron was operating as a whole, which was quite unusual. So I got to know people, before sort of coming back to Hereford, which is the base of the Special Air Service in the west of the country. And because sometimes you might join a squadron and you might not see people for years because they're away on a job, they come back, you're out on one, and so you sort of, you miss people all the time. So for me, it was really good. And then finished that job, which was in Southeast Asia, and literally then came back and then started to get ready for what was called a troop tour of Northern Ireland. So we were the Air Assault Troop was going to be the Special Air Service contingent of the conflict there, which again, I found it really exciting. So all of a sudden, I've become one of those guys I saw when I was 18. We had the long hair and the fast cars and all that, all that stuff going on. That it was we took casualties. We had people killed. There was obviously the terrorist organisations were taking casualties. But the whole sort of gamut of that tour, certainly for me, was so interesting because you could see now where all that human information was coming from, and how all that if you like the darker side of the war was being fought, which was really interesting.
And is that 14 Intelligence Company, or is that something?
No,
that
was
later?
No, because of that tour. What happened was two of us was approached by 14 Intelligence Company, 14 INT, which is an undercover information organization in Northern Ireland. So basically, people like me and this other guy, because we've been brought up in this housing estate, social housing, and we sort of feel at home in, the sort of the same sort of housing estates in Northern Ireland, just the same designs and the same people are living there, that sort of thing. So because we feel comfortable in those environments, we were approached by 14 INT and asked if we want to go to 14 INT, but actually they're telling you there's no choice in the matter you're going, whether you like it or not, which I didn't want to do in the beginning. I thought, well, I'm in the regiment. If I wanted to go to 14 INT, I would have tried for 14 INT. But actually the commanding officer during that time, we all thought he was wrong, but he was absolutely right. He said, look, that skill, that urban undercover work, we're starting to lose that skill because we're going off in other realms. So we need to retake that skill back. So we need people going into 14 INT. So at the time, we were being press gang, but he was absolutely right. It was absolutely right. So I'd done 2 years in Derry, which is the second city in Northern Ireland up in the northwest. And again, that was all sort of, long hair. I had this big permed hair. It looked like Michael Jackson, 1986 sort of haircut. Just running around, basically trying to identify active service units of Provisional IRA, Irish Liberation Army, those sort of organisations that worked in the cell system, and trying to stop their mounting their operations. So trying to identify somebody that was weak. Once we again, because of the cell system, we just know one or two, and it's trying to sort of latch onto them to find out who else is in the cell, then trying to find someone who was weak in that cell. And it could be, an addiction, it could be drugs, alcohol, even homosexuality. It's a very conservative sort of part of the UK. Anything, even say their mother had cancer, anything that we could deem as a weakness that we could then drag them in to become a source, whether they liked it or not. We could get maybe the mother up onto the front of the list for cancer care, that sort of thing. And once we would identify that, we would kidnap them, basically 9 out of 10 times, just headbutt them, put them in the boot of a car, drive them out to the countryside and explain the facts of life. And then we would have members of the special branch would be there who would be doing all the handling, and then trying to get them to become a source, and then trying to find their bomb factories, where the weapons are, just to try and stop, the attacks. And living in Derry and doing that work, I could absolutely see why, kids were joining the provisional IRA, because if I started to hate the army, getting rounded, they used to do these big catchment roundups and, all these sort of dawn house searches, all that sort of stuff. Totally understand it. So I used to hate the army as well by about the end of the first year. But the fact is that I come from a housing estate in London, so I've landed up in the army. They're in a housing estate in Northern Ireland. They're in a provisional IRA. It's as simple as that. That's why we call them players. We don't call them the enemy. We call them players because it's only your personal circumstances have put you where you are.
Interesting. And you did that for 2 years, going to
2
and from
years,
Northern Ireland.
Yeah. So you're there for 2 years. No longer than that, because otherwise there's a tendency after a while, then your cover can get blown. So I done a 2-year tour there, and I come back, and then I've got involved in what we call team jobs. These smaller operations. That one or two things. Well, one of three things really. You go and fight a conflict for the sponsored country. You go and train the indigenous forces in that country, or you train them and lead them. So the stuff we were doing, particularly in West Africa, was fighting the conflicts. Obviously, a lot of the post-colonial states had defence agreements with their respective countries, and so all that sort of stuff was going on, which was good. I learned Swahili before I went. Oh,
nice! And you went to Botswana as part of that, right?
Yeah. I learned Swahili, which I thought was good, interesting. But when I got there, everybody spoke English or Portuguese. And everybody supported a UK football team called Manchester United. So that was just, in doubt, just go Manchester United. And they go, So the Swahili was never used. It was mad. But so a lot of time in Africa, which was again, that was a mixture really of like grey ops, where you'd be sometimes in civilian clothes, sometimes with all the party gear on, and it was just a mixture really. And sometimes you were working for people that want to become the government, or sometimes you work with people who want to stay as the government. And again, it's like democracy. So whatever our government is saying, then you're going to do that job. So we've done that. Obviously quite a lot in the Middle East. Historically, we've always been sort of quite a big presence in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Mm-hmm. And got involved in what was called First Strike in Colombia, which was a CIA-backed operation, where it was the advent of crack cocaine. Obviously, it was a huge epidemic that was sweeping the United States. Once crack cocaine in, the Brits were getting really concerned because it was starting to work here, and there was a fear that it would crumble societies. The crack cocaine, and so we got involved on First Strike, which was one of those jobs where we'd go in and train the anti-narcotics police, and then we would lead them. So we'd be, patrol commanders and have the command set up to go and find the drug manufacturing plants, DMPs, and all that sort of stuff, which was a great job, really amazing job. You did 2 month, 9-month tours down there.
Wow.
And obviously he was getting extra, I've forgotten what they called it. Local overseas allowance used to get paid by the CIA, and it used to get your little envelope every month, which was great. It was probably old drugs money. Who knew?
Yeah, probably.
It was great. So a lot of those sort of team jobs, and going then through the rank system, because when you join the regiment, you lose all your rank and you start again as a troop, private soldier. So I was a sergeant in the infantry, but become a trooper and you start again.
That's a lot of experience. I mean, that's a lot of diverse experience all around the world. I mean, you were probably one of the most well-trained, most experienced operators for that time when 1990 hits. And August 1990,
it's interesting.
U.S. ends up, Kuwait and all that sort of thing.
Kuwait and all that. It is interesting. I think that because of the Brits, basically they want you to do a bit of everything. And there's this thing called a complete soldier. So hence one of the reasons why they wanted people to go back to 14 in to get that urban undercover experience as well. So there's this thing called a complete soldier. And the idea is that you're getting bits of everything, So and sometimes it just become a total pain because you come off one job and then 3 weeks later you're on another, and you're away again. But in the long term, the system did work where you get lots of different sort of operations in different environments. And it does all gel together because you just get that experience. And then obviously experience of others that are, have been on other jobs and on the ground as well. We have a big thing called a cross brief every year, which is in December. And what happens is then whoever's there within the regiment, they all get together and everybody comes up and they do presentations on the jobs that have been happening, what they've learned, what was good, what was bad, what was indifferent, what we need to change. And then everybody's allowed to put their input in just to improve sort of, the effectiveness, this whole thing of this pursuit of excellence.
Oh, yeah. No, it's fantastic.
And it was good. Yeah, it takes place over a week and everybody, gets in there. So everybody from like the commanding officer to the newest trooper is allowed to have an input and you're allowed to speak your mind. Sometimes it goes a bit overboard because obviously there's a lot of people with a lot of things to say.
Sure.
But actually it's a free forum, and everybody can have a chest poke at everyone. And the reason why is because we need to improve on what's already been done.
No, it's amazing. You're making the organization stronger as a whole.
Yeah,
and I always,
exactly.
From reading, your book and growing up as a little kid, anything on the SAS, I would snatch it up and read. And I would, in my head, I'm thinking, we had Vietnam, and then we had flashpoints here and there with Grenada, with Panama, a little bit in Desert One for us, Mogadishu, of course. But those are flashpoints here and there where if you were in the right place at the right time, you went and did that, but it wasn't some like sustained combat operation or it wasn't sustained operations like you guys seem to do really from the end of World War II up through today, all around the world, staying sharp by being in
there's 1 year since the end of the Second World War, there's only been 1 year where there haven't been operations, and that was 1968.
Wow.
And that's it. Every single year there's been an operation going on, involving if you like the Green Army, the regular army, as well as special forces. And I think that's a lot to do with our old colonial past, and again the agreements that we've got and all that sort of stuff going on. So there is there's quite a lot of experience actually. It's quite good to draw on it, and certainly what the old guys, the old and bold, you'd be talking to them certainly about the Middle East. There was a war that was fought by the regiment in Oman. In the 70s, Operation Storm, and it was against communist insurgents coming up from Yemen.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously all the Middle Eastern stuff. You talk to some of these guys, and there was quite a famous battle in Mirbat where. 6 guys, and they had a 25-pounder gun and a mortar, and the insurgents were so close they had to physically hold the mortar vertical to get a decent range, because literally they were trying to drop them at 100 meters away with this 25-pounder and a mortar round, and in shorts and flip-flops, no body armor, and they're just holding this thing. And all that sort of stuff that was going on in the up until 74, I think, the Oman War. So there was a lot of experience there.
Oh yeah. No, one of my favorite photos is of an SAS guy sitting up on this kind of, you'll know the one. If I had it right here, I'd show you, you'd know the photo. And he's sitting there, he's got, I think, a bolt action rifle against his shoulder. And, it's just a beautiful photo, and it speaks not just to that conflict, but to, as a whole, everything that you guys had done since the end of World War II to stay sharp and not just rely on the lessons of 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, like we did with Vietnam. And so I always admired that about the SAS and UK in general, keeping forces out there, not in full-blown conflicts, but just keeping some forward forces out there to stay sharp so that it's not a surprise when you drop a bunch of new guys in and all of a sudden they're in combat for the first time and they're 18, 19, 20, 21, 25, whatever it is.
Exactly.
But you've kept that tradition going to stay sharp. So I always admired that about you guys, and still do today. So when 1990 hits, do you remember where you are when you see a CNN or BBC or a newspaper that says, hey, the U.S. is in the Middle East, and did you think, hey, we're going to be going in there at some point here? Yeah,
basically I was on the I was doing a a 6-month tour on the counter-terrorism team at that time, which is obviously a national and international commitment. So when all that started, in my mind, I thought, well, our squadron wouldn't be committed to that war because of this commitment that we have. There's always has to be a Sabre squadron on the counter-terrorism team. So, but interestingly, the command element of the regiment changed over the counter-terrorism team early, because we all thought we were going to be there for like 2 or 3 years, before it was going to be a long conflict. So all of a sudden, from the point of thinking, well, I'm not going to get involved, we literally handed over, and then 2 days later, we were off to the Saudi, and we were planning and doing preparation for all that traditional stuff that special forces get involved with, disruption of communications, supply lines, we call it prime target assassination, but basically it was just getting out there laying IEDs for the command structure of the Iraqi military. So we were doing our target packs for all that, but then the Scud started firing from the western deserts in Iraq into Israel. And for us, the whole regiment, all of those tasking stopped. And in fact, the job that we had as an air assault troop was 2 hours before the air campaign was going to start. We were going to static line jump into the southeast edge of Baghdad, and we wanted to. We were tasked with trying to hit these 2 electricity turbines that were not for defensive. I think it was just the way they're designed. They were underground, and so the air planners thought they wouldn't be able to take them out. Because obviously that first wave is all about the utilities, water, electricity, get all that destroyed. So our job was then we were going to go in. We were going to jump because of the air threat. We were going to jump at 400 feet as opposed to a tactical jump at 800 feet, normal sort of static line, and basically go in, lay the ordnance, and then just run west and get picked up whenever. They'll come and pick us up whenever. And then as the air war started. So the problem with jumping at 400 feet is that if you have a problem, your lines are twisted or malfunction, there's no time for reserve. So I said as a joke, "Oh, we won't be taking reserves then." And they went, "No, that's right." Cheers, lads.
Oh, man.
So thankfully, that job was cancelled. And then it was all about the Scuds. It was like, so well, you land. He says, "Look, obviously there's going to be, there's going to be a bit of drama on the landing. But you've got to get in, sort that out, and then just go south, and we get people in to pick you up at some stage." But all that changed. There was 2 squadrons were then tasked to go out into the western desert. It's before the ground war, the air campaign started, and try and find these Scuds. There was a deal that was struck by Bush Senior and the Israelis of a 14-day window. If the Scuds continued to fire after 14 days, Israel would join in the conflict, which obviously that's what the Iraqis wanted, because then the alliance we had with the Arab states would crumble, because technically they were going to fight alongside Israel. So everybody's tasking changed, went out. And so I was given a job to take an 8-man patrol to the northwest of Baghdad to try and find a fiber optic cable that ran between Baghdad and through fiber optic cables and microwave to the Scud teams in the Western Desert. So, these things take a couple of hours to rig up, coordinates when and when to fire. The idea was to cut that line of communication. The Scud teams then won't have that information where and when to fire, whilst the other 2 squadrons are out there. They were in half squadron groups trying to find these things. Okay. And when they fired, when they found them, they would either bring fast check in, laser them up, bring fast jet in, or destroy them themselves, their anti-tank devices, that sort of stuff. And the fixed launcher sites that were like concrete sort of devices in the desert that they could drive in and just sort themselves out as quicker, then find them and start destroying those things as well. So that was the plan.
And for the people that are listening, the younger people, the laser designators back then were not something that fits on the end of your rifle. No. Like today, like these things were gigantic.
Like a suitcase,
Those things were huge back then.
It was like a suitcase, absolutely, yeah.
That's crazy. I remember doing those.
Trying to sort of level them up, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's no joke right there. And then when you guys, what was your plan when you found those fiber optic cables? How were you supposed to cut them? How big were they? Or they like what was that? What was the plan there?
Well, interesting. We weren't too sure how to destroy them because there was such a rush to get out there. We were trying to find out, the best way to destroy them. We didn't know whether, we had to blow them up or, I don't know, like headbutt them or something. We didn't really know. So
you'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we decided to do was once we found the cable, we had to deny the cable. So we would put a series of timed explosions, just small explosions on the cable itself, and lay IED. Mm-hmm. So the first one would go off, then the crews would come down, so quite easy to repair. The Iraqi crews would come down to repair. So we'd have the IEDs quite close. And we use a thing called a number 37 switch, which you push and it bounces up in the air and then explodes. So we'd lay them really, really close. So when they come down, they would go off. It would kill or injure the guys who were coming down. The next ones, when the next device blew, we would just spread them out a bit more. So as they're coming in, they'd be cautious, thinking that they'd be around the edge. So each cut, we'd just spread out the switches, make it spread more and more to try and, obviously, because we've got to deny these people. Yeah. And obviously there's the demoralization sort of effect as well, because if they're getting killed and they're getting injured, it's going to slow them down. So that was the plan, just to keep that thing cut as long as possible. So once we found it, we would do a cut, wherever we could get into it, because we didn't know how it was protected at that stage, whether, we had to get through manholes or you could dig it up. We just didn't know. Yeah. But that was the plan. That was the plan.
And before you went in, did you, how long were you planning on being on the ground, or did you know what was the kind of right and left limits there on how
it was 14 days, exactly 14 days to do with this deal that had been done with the Israelis. Okay. So it was 14 days. The commanding officer of the Allied forces at that time, Norman Schwarzkopf. So he come down, he done his bit. He said, "Right, on the ground, 14 days." So we okay, and that's it.
So you're packed at this point. You're packing for 14 days. You're packing food for 14 days. You're packing all of that. That's a heavy ruck.
We had a lot, so much stuff. So we took 14 days water. We took obviously the 14 days food. We're on hard routine, so which lessens the load a bit, because we there's no sleeping bags. Your kit's always on you. There's no flame, so there's no cooking, there's no smoking, there's no, none of that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. We urinate in petrol cans, which we put in our backpack, because we leave nothing there, and we defecate into the ration pack. Put them in the Bergen as well, because actually, if you leave it there, it will be discovered. Whether animals discover it, humans will discover it, because you might be sent back there as well. If it all goes wrong, you might be sent back. So everything you bring in, you bring out. And basically, I just used to put a Gore-Tex jacket over everything at night, and that's it. Because it's hard routine. So that lessens a bit of the load, but it's the communications equipment and the explosives. That was the heavy stuff. Trying to get that amount of it, because we wanted to get as many cuts as we could in, and 14 days of water with the jerry cans. So we just had to pack it and get on with it, basically. And again, it's that whole thing of nobody's forcing you to do this stuff. Right. Everybody volunteers for this, Yeah. So if you don't like it, get out.
That's it.
It's as easy as that.
Time to go. Yeah.
Amazing.
Exactly. Amazing. So you guys load the helos, and is it UK pilots that take you in, or US pilots?
Yeah. We got our own SF flight. And which was really strange, because they've had all this brand new camouflage paint that had been put on, and we thought it was all infrared, special this and special that. And then we found out after the war, it was just the guys had loads of paint with nothing to do. So they just painted some weird shapes all over it. That was it. So we got our own flight. So they obviously coming in really low. The problem we had on going in there, the Iraqis had the Roland anti-aircraft system. So they would then illuminate the aircraft, And if you got myself and the TRC, we had the headphones on talking to the pilots as we were going in. They're all obviously on MVG coming in. And then all of a sudden you hear this loud wailing coming through the headphones where you've been illuminated by the Rolands, Wow. And, and they're, trying to do their evasion and all that sort of stuff once we're over the border. And I didn't like that at all because you've got no control.
Right.
You're on the ground, you've got a bit of control, haven't you? You're sitting in the back of an aircraft, you've got nothing.
Yeah.
No,
hold on.
You got nothing. So just have to sit there and wait. Yeah.
Oh, I know. It's brutal. I didn't like that stuff either, not having control.
Yeah.
And then did you guys do a couple false inserts on the way in, or did you go right to a...
No, we went straight in. Basically, because the window that we had, there were... the ground war hadn't started... the air war hadn't started by then. So the other half squadron groups, they were penetrating, they were on vehicles going out to the Western deserts trying to find. So they were then crossing the border and trying to get in as quickly as possible. It was literally just get in there, just get in. And that was it. And the Rolands were interrogating, and again, we were hoping on the basis they didn't know what they were interrogating. Because obviously there was a huge amount of Iraqi military activity out on the ground as well, because people were being moved south, units that were being moved south, because it was very clear there was going to be a ground invasion of Kuwait to retake it back. Yeah. So a lot of movement, a lot of confusion, and it was all about trying to get in during all that.
Jeez. And so you drop, and how far did you think you were going to have to move with those packs once you dropped off?
Yeah, it was mad. So because of and again, we weren't exactly sure where it was. Yeah. So we landed, and we landed about 17 kilometers short, because what we wanted to do was move in to this MSR, this main supply route, which the intelligence says, well, look, this is it's not a metal road, it's a track system that leads up northwest towards Syria. And said, well, what we reckon is that the fiber optic cable's got to be along that because of the normal maintenance and repair of this equipment. And there were some microwave dishes that were further up on the MSR, so it made sort of sense that the line was coming up that way. So we want to stop short, because what we want to make sure is, number one, that we hit the MSR, and number two, at that night as well, we want to get out and start looking for this fiber optic, because it may not be there. Yeah. It may be somewhere else. So if we had, number one, tactically, because of the noise, so we had our own sort of, again, our own control moving in, but also at the same time checking to make sure that we're not going to cross anything that even resembles something like a fiber optic cable on the way into this main supply route. Because nobody knew where it was exactly. Right. It was all sort of get out there and find it. Simple as that.
Gosh. And then, so you land, you hit the ground, and you start moving right away.
Yep, start moving right away, because what we wanted to do was get there up to that main supply route a bit, quite a lot actually, before first light, because obviously we've got to find our hide, because our biggest weapon is not what we're carrying; it's concealment. So let's get there, let's find a light point, an LUP, let's sort ourselves out, then get out and start looking for this fiber optic cable. In the daytime, we've got to get back in, we've got to hide up, wait for a last light, and then start getting out again. So the emphasis was to get there. If we had time, to get out and start looking for this fiber optic cable. So it was just a matter of, and again, going back to selection days, just tabbing with loads of heavy weight to get there. Yeah. To get there. So we got there, we found an LUP. We found the MSR very, very easy, because what we didn't know, and even Schwarzkopf said, they didn't even know what was happening at that stage. There was an Iraqi mechanized brigade coming down from the border with Iran. Mm-hmm. So they've been fighting a war for 10 years with them. So they had these mechanized brigades up there. And that was coming down south, going via Baghdad to Kuwait. So as we were moving up, we could hear, and then you could start to see all this armor coming down the MSR. So we knew we found it.
Okay.
Found an LUP, and then sent out, myself and, it was an 8-man patrol, so myself and 3 others went out for a clearing patrol. And the other side of the MSR, we got across the MSR. There was some habitation out there, which, normal, what you'd expect, a compound type habitation. That's no threat for us. They're over the other side. A few hundred meters away, there was 2 S-60 anti-aircraft guns that were there and clearly they were there protecting the mechanized brigades as they were coming through. Again, they were no threat to us because they're not, they're in their own country, they're static. It's not as if they're sending out clearing patrols. So I thought, okay, right, we're all right. So got back into the LUP, and then first light, just before first light, I went above the hide, had a look, make sure everything, what we thought we'd see that night was right, and it was. Could see the two S60s, still, traffic, not as much as during the night because there's a lot more moving at night than there was at day. But there was, there was still armored vehicles coming down. All good. So it was about laying up and sending our first situation report, SITREP.
Yeah.
And all it is, they want to know is where we are, what's happening, and what we're going to do about it. And that's it. It's just three things. So we're using our antenna theory. We're laying out antennas onto the ground because
you're doing an HF shot, high frequency.
Yeah.
You're not doing a
we're going to bounce
shot.
the ionosphere. Yeah. So we were encrypting the SITREP, hitting it for that 2-second burst, to bounce off to our receivers, and we weren't getting anything. We're getting corrupt signals. So we're trying it again. Still corrupt signals. And it wasn't until we got back that we realized that we've been given the footprints for the south of the country as opposed to the north of the country. For, because the ionosphere changes and, you're trying to bounce that signal. So we were hitting it. Anyway, it wasn't working. Tried different antenna theory, just doesn't work.
Brutal.
But that was all right. We're still there. It's not as if, everything's going to happen. So we're waiting for last light to get out again, try and find this cable. Feeling quite confident now because of this traffic was moving about. And then we were compromised. We were compromised by a young kid with his goats. We could hear the goats and the lead goat had his little bell on. We could hear this kid shouting in the distance. But for us at the moment, it didn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of noise going on. And it was when the goats started to come over. We was in an depression in a wadi.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was undulating ground of no more than 17 meters over 200 kilometers. It wasn't exactly, it was undulating, but that was it. So we're in our hide. The goat come down, and then this kid started to shout at the goats and coming closer and closer, and then come over, saw us, clearly 8 of us down in the LUP, and quite rightly he started running. Unfortunately, in the direction of the two S60 guns.
Yeah.
There's one of the guys, Vince, who tried to get hold of him, tried to scramble up, get hold of him. It was too late. This kid had gone. So we had to take it as a compromise. During the planning and preparation, obviously, we had a what if scenarios. So basically, because our SITREPs weren't getting through, in theory, what would happen? There would be a helicopter would come in to an emergency RV 3 o'clock that morning, about 15 kilometers away. And the idea would be we would just exchange radios. And then, because we're there 14 days, doesn't matter, we're there 14 days. They would exchange radios, they would go, and then we get back to the LUP and carry on. So I'll take 4 of us to go and do that exchange. So I thought, okay, right, what we're going to do now, we had about an hour and a half till last light. So what we've got to do now is get to that ERV, start making distance, because we could hear, there was a bit of commotion going on now. There was a bit more sort of, vehicle movement than what was expected. So let's get out now, start making distance. We have the cover of darkness, hopefully within about an hour and a half. Just crack onto that ERV and then get on the aircraft. Literally the loadmaster, he's not going to hang around, just grab hold of him, and then he'll be shouting at the pilot, get everybody on. And we'd have to move further along because we're not going back to Saudi. They're not going to take us back to Saudi. We've still got to carry on with the job.
Okay.
So we move along further and try and find another place. But it never happened. We had our first contact. We had 2 BMPs of Russian personnel carriers come down and a truck, soft skin sort of vehicle. There's nothing you can do but stand your ground. It's like it's pointless running. It's like you're in the middle of the desert. So one of the patrol initiated the contract. We had 66 each, anti-armor rocket each. So he initiated the contact. Luckily, we just started getting rounds down, quite frankly. And then certainly when the first BMP stopped, there was no direct, they were taking hits, but 66 weren't doing that much. But it was confusing them, it was stopping them. That's the main thing. And then we had two 5.56 millimeters that were just trying to hit it, just trying to get those optics. So that's all you could do. And then we just went for it. So we fire maneuvered, getting a white Foss in there, all that sort of stuff. And then see what happens the other side, quite frankly, during the reorganization. We got the confusion was great. Everyone was confused, quite frankly, us included, because all the white Foss's smoke was out by then. And then it was clear what we weren't going to do is then make this ERV, because it'd be clear, that was south. So they'll know they'll be heading south. So what we've done, we boxed it, and we started to put in our escape and evasion plan, which the E&E plan was going to what we would call a war RV. And the war RV is normally the American or the British embassies in the nearest country of safety, which ironically was Syria at that stage.
Amazing.
And normally what happens, you're given proof statements, and you'll get to those embassies. You won't knock on the door because they won't let you in. So you have to jump the fence or something, quickly hug a tree, and just keep shouting out these statements. Okay. And then hopefully what happens, you get taken through the system. So we were heading for the war RVs in Syria. During that time, as we're trying to get up to the border, there were three were killed. 4 were captured, myself included, and only 1 eventually made it across the border and got to the British embassy, and then eventually was taken down to Cyprus, to the British sovereign base down the bottom there.
On that first contact, did you drop those big rucks? How did that work out?
Absolutely. Yeah. Basically, there's a command which says just stand your ground. So literally, as the command goes out, stand your ground, everybody drops them. You've got a quick release, just drop all that gear, and you've got your equivalent of your harnesses on. So you've got water, 24 hours of food, ammunition. So the priorities are ammunition, water, food, and you've got your basic field dressings, that sort of stuff. Right. Your morphine, your Omlipon is around your neck anyway, so everyone's got 2 Omlipon on them, all that sort of stuff. So you're able to operate with that stuff. So the gunners, we had for the gunners, we had a box each. So people were just taking that out and just shoving it down their front. Take the belts out, just shove it down the front. Some of them had time to do it, some of them didn't. So we had ammunition for the 5.56 guns. And that's it. You just got to stand your ground. And it's an interesting way that it works within within the regiment, where the command structure, there was 2 guys there who were perfectly capable of being command as well. But the way that the command structure works is that once you're operational on the ground, there's only one voice. So you can agree with it, or you can disagree with it. It doesn't really matter, because the only way to keep integrity of a patrol and hopefully keep people alive is to do what's being said. And then if anybody survives, great, you can argue about it later on. If everybody's dead, nobody knows it's a cock-up, so it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? But in the planning and preparation stage, everybody has an input because they're allowed to, because everybody's got a vested interest. But even at that stage, the commander will go, okay, right, this is what I've heard. This is what we've got to do. That's the mission. This is how we're going to do it. Then if people agree with it or not, they go with it. Because otherwise it's just going to be a total cock-up and people are going to die. So that stand your ground order, whether if people agree with it or not, everybody does it. And then from that, they start preparing. And then, everybody knows they just got to stand there and fight. That's hence, one of the guys, he's dead now, Bob Consiglio, one of the patrol who initiated it with a 66, said, well, it's going to happen, let's get on with it, sort of thing. And then off it went.
Wow. And is this near dusk, or is it dark at this point? And
no, we had about another 45 minutes before it was dark. So what we done, we boxed it. So we started heading south as if they would think we're heading towards Saudi anyway. So as soon as it was dark enough, we then started box around to head just literally on a compass bearing northwest, because we knew if we had due northwest, we would hit the Syrian border.
Mm-hmm.
And at that stage, before we went out, we were told that the CIA would have people on the Syrian side ready to pick up people like down pilots, people like ourselves. So we said, okay, how do we identify the CIA guys who are ready to pick up the runners? And they went, oh, it's going to be easy because they're going to put white sheets outside their rooms. I thought, well, we give that one a miss.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Anybody who's been out in that area.
Because everything was so quick and it was all about just getting out there. And you go, well, we give that one a miss. We'll just crack on to the embassies. But so we just started heading northwest really. And then one of the guys was, it wasn't a wound, a gunshot wound or anything, but badly damaged leg with all the running around. Because obviously it's not desert; it's that shale and rock and all that stuff. So he was a bit damaged. We then had snow instead of the rain. One of the reasons why the advance back into Kuwait was delayed a bit because of all the rain. Because we were so far north, our one was snow. So we had a guy who's starting to go down with hypothermia.
And your gear isn't what it is today for those listening. It's if someone just recently left special operations with a great kit today with all sorts of layering systems and all this technology.
None of that.
It was a little different back then. I mean, you guys were...
Gore-Tex jacket, that's your lot.
Yeah. What did you have at this point to keep you warm?
Well, literally a bit of Gore-Tex, and that was it. So we broke SOP, standing operation procedures. And again, it's going back to that if you like, that form of democracy within the patrol, saying, right, we've got this guy, Bob, is not going to survive the night. What we've got to do, we've got to get some hot fluids down him. We've got to start sorting him out. So we were doing body exchange, heat exchange, all that sort of stuff in an old tank berm that the Iraqis would build to put their tanks in with the war with Iran,
Wow.
So they would be fixed positions.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in one of them trying to keep out the wall and saying, look, we need to get a flame on. We need to, in theory, expose ourselves because otherwise he's going to die. So the patrol's decision is to let that happen, knowing of the consequences. And obviously, we're trying to conceal it as much as possible. So we started getting hot fluids down him, and he was doing all right, actually. But then we just got to make distance at night. Again, every time, make distance at night, hide up in the daytime. At one stage, we could hear loads of fast jets coming above us, way above the cloud cover. And I'm trying to work out in my head what our Iraqis are, as the air war started, I weren't too sure. We had TACBs, which are the tactical beacons that can talk to aircrew, the international distress frequency on it. So I thought, right, okay, well, I'm going to pull it and I'm going to talk and see if we can get a pilot up.
Yeah.
So there was just too many. I could hear just too many in the air for them to be Iraqis, surely. Right. So I pulled it, any call sign. This is Bravo 20, a ground call sign, over. And we've got a faint American voice. And the good thing, it came back with our call sign, say again, Bravo 20, say again, Bravo 20.
Wow.
And then obviously it gone.
Wow.
It gone. And then there was an airfield that was kilometers away, way in the distance, called H2, I think, which was designated as H2. And they were going to hit that because then you could see in the distance, the air war started and they were starting to hit these airfields. So I thought, right, at least they'll have a position and they've recognized the call sign. And then we'll just crack on. And we got really 11 kilometers where we really then started to hit a lot of problems with continuous contacts. The patrol had split. We were then fighting in like 2s and 3s to get to the to get to the border. By then, the guy Bob Consiglio with the hypothermia who initiated the contract, he had the Minimi 5.56 Minimi in front. So basically, we'd have him up in front. When we hit a contact, he would just start getting rounds down so we could get out and then start. Literally, we weren't going to take them on. We're just going to get the rounds down and run and try and box around the problem. Yeah. Trying to get to the border. But literally, he had about 25 rounds left by then. And so we hit a contact, he started, and then he took a round. He took a number of rounds. One went into a white foss that he had that went up. He was dead. So we started boxing around. And then literally I got within about 2 kilometers of the border, and you could hear like sporadic little, firefights going on here or there.
Wow.
And you can tell the signatures, between sort of, 7.62 short where the Iraqis were firing and our 5.56. So you could see what was going on. There's a lot of confusion. But it was becoming first light. And what I didn't want to do was get caught on the border trying to get into Syria, because I didn't actually know what physically the border was.
Right.
I didn't know it was barbed wire or
anything. I mean, yeah.
Anything, yeah. Syria welcomes careful drivers. I didn't know what it
Welcome
was.
to Syria.
I just didn't know what it was, yeah. So I thought, right, well, what I need to do is hide in Iraq, stay in Iraq for the day, hide up, and then that gives me all night to negotiate the border, because it's a political border. It's not a social border. I needed to get across the border, and then I needed to make as much distance as possible away from it.
Yeah.
So,
are you guys still all together at this point, or have you had?
No, everybody's split up. So by then we've had two were. I knew two were dead. I didn't know about the third one. So we got split in little groups. I was with another guy who was a New Zealander, and literally we were maybe about 3 kilometers from the border. It was just coming up on the rise. What we heard was the commotion, and then they're just, they know there's something out in front, so they're just firing. We then both got down. I went right. I presumed he went left, but he didn't. What he done, he got shot in the foot. So he made it a little bit, and he was down. And they captured him at some stage later on. As far as I was concerned, he was dead at that stage. Yeah. So by the time I got to the border, I was on my own. There was another 2 guys that had gone back down towards the Euphrates. And the only way to escape, as they were getting followed up, was to swim the Euphrates. And on the other side, what happened was that the guy called Steve Lane, really suffering with hypothermia, going through the river. So his mate, what he done, he broke into one of these little diesel sheds that were pumping up the water from Euphrates to feed the fields. And so he got in there trying to sort him out, and he wasn't really working. So by the time it come to first light, he tried to keep him going for a couple of hours. It was clearly he was going to die. So what this guy Dinger done was to get out. He had about 2 or 3 rounds left. Fired him off, which I heard, because I could hear it in the distance, and 5.56 going off. I didn't realise what was happening at the time. And then a lot of commotion. He just started running, hoping just to leg it. But hopefully what they'll do, they go in and they'll find Steve Lane and hopefully keep him alive. That never happened, whether he died at some stage during capture, or he just died there. Nobody really knows. So he obviously this guy Dinger got caught as well. So there was groups, split up at the night time, because we just had the initial contact, which was exactly 11 kilometers from the border, was just like chaos. And then we just carried on moving forward, and then obviously running out of ammunition. So I was feeling quite cocky, because I thought, again, by 4 or 5 o'clock, I didn't have long until last light, and I thought, well, I can get out and then just get over the border. But I got found. I still don't know how I was discovered, but there'd been trucks going over this culvert, Iraqis going out looking, and all that sort of stuff going on, looking for, which they assume were Israelis. And clearly somebody had seen me somewhere, and they come in, they're firing all around the culvert, screaming and shouting. Jeez. And when lads get a bit excited, I'm not going to get out because it's just too much excitement and too many rounds going around. You'll end up getting shot for excitement rather than anything else. So they wanted me out. I'm not getting out. They eventually dragged me out. And I don't know what Americans call it. We call it tactical questioning. Basically, just getting filled in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I had some teeth knocked out, and
right away, right outside the culvert.
Yeah. So there was lots of that. So obviously they're taking frustrations out. They've been taking casualties. There's been a lot going on. So I thought I was going to be shot anyway. So taken in the vehicle, taken to a border town called Al Qaim, and there was a military base there, and that's where I met the guy who'd given up his own position to try and save this guy Steve Lane in the shed, in the diesel shed. So then me and him got paraded through town, and the air war had started by then, so there was bombing every night now. So obviously everybody was taking their frustrations out on us, and we thought that we were going to get shot at the end of it.
Sure.
So we actually made it worse by retaliating rather than just taking it, because we thought, well, we're going to get shot anyway. Wow. But what we didn't realize, there was a reward that were given for down pilots and prisoners. And also, part of our escape kit, we always have gold with us. So we have 20 gold. Yeah. They were straight after that. We get 20 gold sovereigns that we carry. We normally tape them up and put it inside the body on a thin belt. So it's like bribe money. So, everybody knows the currency of gold. So obviously they had that as well. So everybody was very, very happy. And eventually taken to Baghdad. We tried to get into Baghdad, but we had to come back and wait for a couple of hours because the bombing had started, so, you had the bombing campaign going on.
Is that all one day? Is that all from capture to getting or trying?
Yeah, it's capture. Yeah, it happened all that night. So we literally go through the town. We went back into the camp and they tried to get us to the interrogation center that night. And the bombing campaign never ceased. So literally at last light until first light, you just have the Allied aircraft coming in, just taking everything out. So we sort of sat there, and it almost on the horizon looked like a Second World War scene, with all the sort of the flashes and the explosions. And then we got there into the interrogation center and put into individual rooms, into these cells. And there was already somebody there. They were getting filled in, and it was clearly, a European voice. And it was another member of the patrol who'd been captured earlier on. And so there was 3 of us in the interrogation center. And what they wanted to know was, for us to admit we were Israelis. To bring Israel in the war, and looking back, it sort of made sense, because we weren't dressed as regularly as like European Brit soldiers or whatever. A bit ad hoc, we had bits and pieces, and stuff. So it sort of made sense. And also the guy who'd been shot with the Minimi, Bob Consiglio, he was a Swiss Italian guy from the British Royal Marines, and because we have a policy, we take, any nationality we take, and then they can get Brit citizenship. I think Americans have the same sort of system, isn't it? You can join and then you can get American
something
citizenship.
Similar, yeah.
It's so, yeah, we do something similar to that. So this guy was a Swiss Italian, joined the Royal Marines, and then went for selection. And very dark skin, curly hair, and we didn't know at the time, but no foreskin. So he fit the criteria as a Jewish guy from Israel. So what we had is we have a cover story. So we kick off with, first of all, the Geneva Convention, the Big Four, number, rank, name, date of birth, all that sort of stuff. Funny enough, at that stage, you couldn't give religion, but it would be on your dog tags. It's a really crazy sort of system, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we had all that going on. And then you would break into cover stories. And the cover story was that we were medics from all different units, so you could talk in detail about your unit that you come from. I'm a green jacket, I'm a medic. We were all brought together, and we were going out to try and find down pilots, like a search and rescue teams. Right. And helicopter landed and took off and left us, and we're just trying to get home. Basically that. Problem we had with that is, obviously, the West backed Iraq with their war with Iran. So I'm talking about being a green jacket. One of the interrogators go, well, what battalion was you in? I was in the 2nd, battalion. He went, oh, do you know sort of Vivian Richards, Captain Richards? And I did. He said, yeah, I was at Sandhurst with him. Which is our military academy. No
way. That's
because
incredible.
we backed them for 10 years in the war with Iran. So, lots of problems with the military guys on that. So, but it was just keeping at it, really. And obviously, we're all medically trained, so we can talk about the sort of medical aspect of it. The downside really was the civilians, the secret police. That was more of a physical stuff. So we was always handcuffed and blindfolded, stripped. There was these sort of conventions where the guards would come in and kick you about and punch you about, all that sort of stuff. But during the interrogations, you would go in always handcuffed and blindfolded, and we were whipped, beaten with a like a metallic ball thing on a stick. My back teeth that were smashed up were pulled out by a guy who said he was a dentist and he practiced in London for 9 years. Again, because of this relationship we've had with them back in the war against Iran. So teeth pulled out, and obviously we had cuts and sort of damage during the contacts and trying to get to the border. So all the utilities were gone. This constant air campaign every night. So they used to have paraffin heaters. They would heat spoons up and then help you with your wounds and burn you on your cuts. And it was again that conduct under capture. Yeah. That's when I was really thinking about certainly the French woman and the Phantom pilot, Marine Corps Phantom pilot. There's nothing you can do. There is nothing you can do. It's just trying to keep the integrity of your mind, really. And also during this week when you listen to these people's experiences, the Phantom pilot had 5 years of this. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm on week 2 or week 3 of this at the moment. You know what I mean? So, and that guy survived. Yeah. So you're thinking, well, okay, it's not good, but it's not as bad as what he had, and he survived. So that's let's take the lessons from that and learn it. So we were there about 3 weeks, around about 3 weeks, and again every night taking hits in the compound. The bombing was continuous.
And the whole time they keep asking you if you're Israeli. Is that's
Israeli? It changed after about 2 weeks. I don't even know why I didn't think about it before. We're going, we're not, we're search and rescue teams, we're this. Basically, I've got a foreskin. I said, look, I've got a foreskin. And they're going, what? Well, again, we obviously in Islam there's circumcision, and so I'm going to trying to explain it. Foreskin. I said, look, I'll show you. Take the handcuffs off, and I'll show you. Which was difficult because it was like February now in Baghdad, and it's pretty cold. So I'm like pulling it out, and the guys in this just started laughing and shoved a date in my mouth. I thought, right, well, that was good. Then he said, right, well, what are you doing here? And then they showed Bob Consiglio's kit. Yeah. You could see, and the only reason I knew that white Foss really went up, and because all the kit was burnt and all that sort of stuff. We just kept with the cover story. We then were moved to, we didn't know it at the time, to a prison Abu Ghraib, and that's when we start to meet a lot of pilots, shot down pilots that were being brought in, actually exclusively American pilots. A lot of Marine Corps jump jet pilots. And there was a guy who came in, because again, conduct under capture, what you got to try and do is communicate with these people in the prison as much as possible. Who you are, where you're from, what unit you're from. So if anybody does get out, we can then say who we've seen and with names. So a guy got brought in, and there was a guy who was a Marine Corps jump jet pilot called Joe Small. He'd had his leg broken, his arm broken, and the guards were kicking it, and all that sort of stuff was going on with him. And then the night after, another guy brought in, and this guy was called Troy Dunlap, I think it was. And we're trying to identify who is it. And then so Troy went, I'm Troy. He was a Black Hawk search and rescue guy. His aircraft being shot down, and then Joseph Small went, and Joseph Small, U.S. Marine Corps. He went, sir, I'm your search and rescue. It's like, really, yeah, I know the whole old aircraft went down. So that went on. There was no interrogations there, no proper interrogations. But again, it's, they're taking hits in a compound, they're taking casualties. So it was everything from guards coming in, with sticks and batons, that sort of stuff. There was another guy who wanted to hear me sing songs from Queen, because he was a Queen fan,
Wow.
And then at one stage, I had to eat my own feces for a joke. But everybody by then, we all got hepatitis anyway while we were there. But clearly that didn't help because it was a joke, and it was going back to that thing. The French woman and the Phantom pilot said, "She's got no control." So do you not do it and then get another beating, or do you just do it? And get on with it and do it. So I decided to get on with it. And one of the big problems was the taking hits in a compound from the bombing every night. There's this thing called the JDAM, which is a bit of ordnance that locks onto radars. So you can hear this thing, it's like zzz, 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 and then as it gets closer, it's zzz, 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 and you're thinking, we're going to get killed here by our own ordnance,
Yeah.
And it's, but yeah, that was every night, just literally you could, you knew it was going to happen within, literally as soon as it was last light, it would happen.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden it happened during daylight. Well, we thought it was bombing, but what it was fast jets going over Baghdad because the war had happened, and they were going supersonic, and they were sonic booms over the city. And what they were trying to tell people was down below prisoners that it was over, which initially I didn't get. I thought they were bombing in daylight, which was a good thing, because it looks right. Okay, well, there's progress. But yeah, the war was over. And the Iraqis done a deal with Algerian medical staff to come in and treat the civilian casualties, whatever it was, 110,000 casualties, obviously a lot more injured. And the deal was the Red Cross said, well, bring in the medical staff if you then release the prisoners. So there was an initial prisoner release, and there was myself and another Marine pilot, was the only one left in this part of Abu Ghraib, and we thought, and he was way down, he was right at the other end of the cell line as well. And we thought, well, we're going to be here for a few more years now. And literally, I think it was about 4 or 5 days later, there was a second wave of prisoner releases, which we were part of, in the final prisoner release.
All of you guys, did you know had you seen the rest of your patrol in the prison?
No, only 2 other members. The other guy who was captured was the New Zealander who got shot in the foot. Oh. And it wasn't until I got to the Red Cross location in Baghdad that he was there, sort of laying there. And there was another guy from the regiment as well who was part of those half squadron groups.
Okay.
Who'd been shot on they were trying to hit a transmitter station, and he'd been shot and captured. In fact, he was a squadron sergeant major.
Wow!
So it was so he'd been shot, he was down, and they captured him. So there was 2 guys that were wounded that were coming out with us, and we were there for about, I think it was about 2 days, because it was interesting where the military wanted to get you out. The Iraqi military wanted to get you out because they wanted the medical staff in. Certainly the secret police didn't want you out. And that's when the conflict started in the city. So instead of all the tracer going up towards the aircraft, it was going horizontal against each other around the city, where the military were taking on the secret police side of life. Wow. So we eventually was taken to the airport and put in a hangar. And again, handcuffed and blindfolded. We were all put up against the wall, and we could hear all the weapons cocking. So everybody thought we were now going to get shot. And it was interesting, the different reactions from different people, because there was obviously a lot of Allied, there were Saudi pilots there, predominantly American and Brit pilots. And the way that different people react, some people were just praying, some people were starting to sob. And it was interesting to hear that array of different sort of situations, because the most embarrassing thing was the one that was begging was a Brit, and he knows who he is. But he was, it was a Brit pilot who was begging and sobbing a bit. And there was one of the American pilots who just shouted out like, "Shut up." He said, "The last thing I want to hear is this whimpering."
Wow.
And I spoke to him when he was on the plane. I thought he was praying, but he wasn't, because he was sort of next to me. I thought he was gently praying. What he was doing was talking to his granddaughter who he'd never seen, because the granddaughter had been born during the war whilst he was a prisoner, or just before, when he was deployed. So he said, well, I was just talking to the granddaughter. Yeah, and the last thing I want to hear is this like cacophony of like whimpering and everything, which I thought was quite cool. Yeah. Actually, it was quite good.
That's incredible. And when did you find out that you weren't getting shot on that wall? How long were you?
Well, they just started. Yeah, it was literally, it was all over and done with in about 2 minutes. And they just started laughing, and you could hear them like walking away. And then we were, the Red Cross sort of came back, took over again, and then we were put on on an aircraft, and then we're flown out. The Red Cross took us out. It was a Swiss aircraft charter. And then as we got up into sort of the cruising altitude. And then basically we just had I think it was two American F-16s and two Tornadoes come down either side of us.
Yeah.
And with all the insults, everybody had been written insults. So the pilots are putting up all insults to the pilots that were in the Red Cross aircraft.
Oh, no way.
Because they're being captured, all that normal stuff going on, So it was good fun. It was good fun.
That's incredible. Where do you guys
just a relief to get out?
And are you like, how much pain are you in at this point? Is it your jaw? I mean, did they give you anything for your when they pulled those teeth, or did they just reach in and yank those things?
Yeah, they just yanked them out. Everybody arrived in Riyadh, and then we were taken to Cyprus, where we've got what we call a sovereign base. It's quite a big base there with a hospital and all that. So we were in there for about 3 or 4 days, where the dentist started sorting us out. We got wounds checked, discovered we had hepatitis, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Psychologists turned up, so we went through that period. We were given little day sacks with a watch and things like normality sort of things. We were there for about 4 days. So we had remedial care, and then when we got back into the UK, it wasn't constant. It was about 6 months on and off. I had nerve damage in my hands. I had reverse sensation syndrome, where if you put them in hot water, it feels cold, and vice versa. And my sort of the forefinger and the middle finger on each hand. I had sensation, but there was no sort of message for strength. So say like a can of soda or something, I couldn't open it up. I put my finger in, no, it's there. But as I pulled, it would just open up. So, and it was to do with the nerves, because the nerves were severed, but they grow from the base of the skull, and then there's a regeneration. So it was waiting for that, and sort of getting tested to make sure that was okay.
And is it in Cyprus where you find out that Chris made it to Syria, and you
find out it was it was when we flew from Riyadh. We did the Red Cross flight, and then we're on a C-130 to go to Cyprus, and they were our guys were already on the flight, and they're telling us what exactly happened, and we went into debrief immediately actually with the intelligence guys, and again it was that stuff. Well, who else have you seen? What haven't you seen? That sort of stuff. So by the time we got to Riyadh, we were fully aware of what had gone on.
Okay.
And the situation with the communications footprint being wrong, the frequency predictions. So that was that. We got back, and then served another 3 years in a regiment in an organisation called Revolutionary Warfare Wing. So because of my troop experience in Northern Ireland and the 14 Intelligence Group, it's a small group of people that work for the intelligence service. And you've got 2 wings, if you like, outside the Sabre squadrons. You've got Counter-Revolutionary Warfare Wing. They're the guys who are trying to stop stuff happening, trying to stop, counter-insurgencies and revolutions and all that. And then you've got Revolutionary Warfare Wing, and they're the guys who are there to start them up. So, which is a lot more easier, quite frankly. I've done 3 years on an RWW, which was great. And then the American administration at the time decided to privatize what was going on in Colombia, and it was called Plan Colombia. So American and Brit companies were given those contracts. So I got out after 18 years, basically because I'd done the tours in Colombia. And they said, well, do you want to come and work? It's the same guy, same setup and all that. I went, yeah, okay. So I got out to do that job. And whilst that job, was was getting started. I wasn't in country at that time. I was approached about writing the story, and it was published when I was in Colombia. And the publishers rang up and said, the book's doing really well. It's I think now it's still the biggest selling war book of all time, all that sort of stuff. And they said, do you want to do another one? And I went, well, what do you think? Absolutely. It's a ticket and I'll come back and do it. Yeah. And that's how it really all started.
Man, that's incredible. But going back to when you land back in the UK, how are you met by SAS? How do they bring you back into the fold and start doing their debriefs? And then what did that feel like? And what was that like? Because it'd been a while since someone had been since something like this had happened. And then what lessons did you pass on to the regiment? What did you want to pass along to make sure that was not forgotten from your experience?
Yeah, it basically we landed at a military air base called Brize Norton. Then we had because we've got our own helicopters that are based in Hereford, the camp in the SAS. So the helicopters picked us up immediately. We're back in Hereford, and we went in. The commanding officer was there, and he said, "Look, take today off.
You've earned a day.
Literally, take the day off." Because what we didn't know at that time until we got to Hereford, the next of kin, obviously, like all military, we fill in next of kin forms, who to inform if you're dead, all that sort of stuff. The next of kin have been informed that we were probably dead. Wow. So they, until we got picked up by the Red Cross, thought we were dead. So they were going through that process. I said, take the off, back in tomorrow and straight into debrief, because everybody else was still in Saudi at that stage. So we then went immediately into debrief with military intelligence guys, the civilian intelligence services, trying to piece everything together. Again, what exactly went on the ground, what went right, what went wrong, all that sort of stuff. And we were in debrief for about 2 weeks. By that time, the squadrons were coming back, and I was given a card of free. It was like a cartoon sort of Christmas card or birthday card or whatever of 3 guys in loincloths hanging up, with a Roman sort of guy with a whip underneath. And it's called the Birdman of Baghdad. That's what they've renamed it, because straight away the humor comes back.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Because you're there and, so all the piss taking happens, which was quite nice, because all that sort of, back to normality as much as possible. And then what happened was I then found myself giving a lot of briefings to different military people. And again, Schwarzkopf came down for the day. We briefed him and his guys for the day. That's when we learned about, he said, well, if I knew the armored brigade was there, we wouldn't have gone. They said, a bit late now. All good. But it's the same thing. Don't like it, get out. It's just as it is, So a lot of debriefs, different organizations. It went to the States and done the sort of debriefs, different organizations there. And then what happened was it got involved in the conduct under capture, both here and the United States, the FBI enrichment program. And again, because they've had, particularly in Mexico, they've had like agents that have been, taken hostages, got involved in that program. And for maybe about 9-10 years, part of the free services, the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, part of their training is they got to listen to me waffle on for about 2 hours on a DVD talking about conduct under capture and the lessons learned and what works and what doesn't work, and trying to explain it. Basically, I was just saying about exactly what the SOE woman and the Phantom Pilot were saying, because they're absolutely right. You've got no control. Just accept that and just keep trying to keep some integrity of your mind, because that's all you can do. So it was just repeating what those 2 guys have said, really.
Amazing. And did you come back and say, hey, you know what we need? We need night vision. We need thermals. We need better boots.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. Because of the way that the regiment works is it's the first time since the Second World War that all the squadrons, apart from the counter-terrorism team, all the 3 squadrons have been involved in the same sort of conflict as a mass. So there was shortages. We had to make our own Claymore mines. We made them, with ice cream cartons and, whatever we could find, bits and pieces, because there wasn't enough Claymores to go around.
Jeez.
So, and the argument was, well, you're off in 6 hours' time. If you've got them, you've got them. If you haven't, we'll make some. It's simple as that. So we made them. And going around different squadrons and all that, and saying, well, 40 millimeter grenade, for the grenade launcher, bits and pieces like that, because it was just such a rush to get out there. All that stuff was sort of 2 days behind. So yeah, a lot of that, working out. The fact is, well, we need that kit, we need this,
right?
If we're going to have a major conflict again, where you've got like 3 squadrons doing the same job, without a doubt.
Incredible. And then who approached you initially when you were in the UK or Colombia, or however that worked out, about writing the book and said, had you thought about it already, or was it something that?
It was a general. Yeah, it was a general. So basically, it was an ex-general who was at one stage was director of Special Forces, and I got an invitation to go to his house for a dinner, which you are going. You will be there.
Right.
You will be there at 7
o'clock.
o'clock.
Yes.
Yeah. You are going. Whatever you want. There was even a dress code. Smart and casual. It's that sort of thing. Right. So anyway, turned up, and basically by then we call it premature voluntary release. So it's a contractual thing. You sign a bit of paper, and it's sort of you can withdraw your contract, because we can only serve 22 years, whether we like it or not.
Okay.
As a regular soldier. So I've done 18, so it's quite easy to sort of do that paperwork. Said, well, your PVR, and I went, yeah. Explained the job that I was going to, which is quite a normal thing as well. And it happens in American Special Forces as well, when these jobs come up and people are sort of asked whether they want to get out and do them. And he said, well, look, I've got an idea. Why don't you write about your experiences with on the ground with Bravo 20, and I'll write about what went on in the bigger picture, went on in Riyadh and what was going on and all that. And I thought about it. I thought, well, he's not doing it for my benefit. And so I phoned up an RAF navigator who, him and the pilot, a Tornado pilot, they'd already published a book, and they were still serving in the RAF. It was still a thing. And I said, well, how does this book business work? And literally he explained, the normal thing, well, exact same stuff, getting an agent and all that sort of stuff. So I went back the next day and I said, well, actually, if I do it, I'll do it myself. Thanks for the offer, but I'll do it myself. And then just explored it really and got on with it.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, yeah, everybody I know read this book, Bravo 20, absolutely incredible. And I think you're right. It is the best-selling story of modern war ever written. And then what is, of course, you do Immediate Action after that. That's the second book that you talked about when they said, do you want to do another one? This one's selling really well.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Of course, all of us read that as well. And then somehow you start consulting on film. You do Heat. And of course, that's the scene. Everyone will know what I'm talking about after the bank robbery, is one that still holds up today and was one of those things that kind of changed the industry as far as realism in film. And you have guys using their sights, bringing the rifle to their shoulder, changing magazines, shooting,
exactly, no more Hollywood Max,
all those things. And you were a part of that.
Yeah. It was great. It was almost like a weird film anyway, because I got a message saying, well, there's this director in Los Angeles and he wants you to come over and work on a film with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. And, as you would do, go, yeah, all right, leave it at that. But literally about a week later, the script turned up and they said, no, he's serious. This guy, Michael Mann, is serious. I'm like, okay. And so we arranged a phone call, phoned him up, and he said, look, there's 3 things I want you to look at. Is the very first armor car robbery, the Platinum robbery, and literally on the script it just went World War III. He said, this is what I want, and anything else, make your notes up and come over to Los Angeles. So I thought, even if nothing happens, at least I'll get a free trip to Los Angeles. So I made my notes and I went over and was there for a couple of weeks and sat down with Michael Mann, going through it all, and we had those big Tonka toys, those big sort of trucks and, on the carpet and moving them around, that sort of thing. And then he said, great. He said, well, do you want the job? I went, yeah, all right, of course, as if. And and literally was there for 7 months. So it's all of the actors, because Michael Mann is just wants everything so right. So all of the actors, everything you see on the film, he wanted the actors to be able to do live. So we'd go down to Orange County Ranges and really start off with basic pistol work and basic sort of, rifle work. And then coming in, drawing the, punch and draws, doing all CQB stuff. Moving on to actually driving, Lincoln town cars into the range, shooting through them, people getting out, taking on fire maneuver forward, live ammunition. No idea how much the insurance cost. I have no idea, but it was like, he wanted it. That's what he wanted. So all of certainly Val Kilmer become, like, without a doubt, a competition standard shot. Without a doubt. It was just, because what he said, look, if I do a scene, because I'm not the principal actor, if the principal actor's looking good, they're going to use that scene. So I've got to be really on top of my game. And literally I was in North Carolina, and I was doing one of these lectures with the 82nd Airborne, and I'd never seen the film in its entirety. So I went to the movie theater in Fayetteville, and obviously all full of soldiers, and the Val Kilmer sort of moment where he's firing, he changes the magazine. Yep. We've got all these soldiers going, yeah, and waving and shouting around. So I got on the phone, the biggest mistake I made in my life. I got on the phone and rang Michael, and I said, just an amazing reaction, during the firefights and all that. But because Michael was such a perfectionist, he goes, at what point did they scream? At what point did they jump up? I said, I don't know. It's just during people are just enjoying it. But he wanted to know the exact moment, and from there I started getting, involved in, Black Hawk Down and some Jason Statham films, and just a lot of the sort of pre-production, because I found a lot of the time on set can be quite boring, actually. But and you're sitting there. But pre-production stuff I really, really enjoy. All that training and just talking about the script and the characters and all that sort of stuff is really, really good. Oh, so it was. I don't know. And then landed up there for about 3 years, I think, in Los Angeles. Just doing one film after the other. It was great.
Wow. And then during that time, do you start thinking about writing some thrillers, the Nick Stone series, and then the Tom Buckingham series later?
Yeah.
Does that all start to kind of come into fruition?
It all started. It was Michael Mann who helped me. It's because I was thinking about it, and what I didn't have was the concept of structure. And again, there's so much in Los Angeles where you can go out and you can look, and there's classes, and there's he said, don't worry about it all. He said, look, everything's based on a 3-act drama. No matter, it can be 5 acts, 6 acts, it doesn't matter. It's all based on a 3-act drama. So have a prologue, set it up, have a traditional 3 acts, have an epilogue, short and sharp, before they get bored. And that was it. So
that's fantastic. That's great advice. That's how I set mine up.
Exactly. And he said, don't think about chapters. At the end of a chapter, he said, that's where the commercial break comes. Think of it that way. They're not paragraphs, they're scenes. End of the chapter, commercial break. He said, because all of us, without realizing it, understand 3-act dramas, and because we've been exposed to TV all of our lives. Yep. So he says, we know it, whether we know it or not.
Yep.
So use it, because the unconscious will recognize it straight away.
Oh, no, that's exactly right. And I grew up with that. I didn't need to study that 3-act drama and a prologue, epilogue. It's just what I enjoyed being a reader my entire life. So that totally that's amazing. And I think you have over 30 books now. Is that right? And then a bunch of other different projects going on in different industries. And you're a busy guy.
Well, there's the Tom Buckingham series is now. There was a movie that came out about 2-3 during lockdown. Yep. So that was number 2. That was behind Wonder Woman in the US.
Awesome.
Netflix are going to show it, I think, at the end of August at some stage. And I've just sold.
That's Red Notice, right?
Red Notice, yeah. I've just sold a short story that I've done on a reading initiative for adults trying to get them back into reading, called The Grey Man, and that's just been bought by Bollywood. So I haven't got a clue what they're going to do with it, but it's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to that.
That's amazing. I saw The Grey Man and I wasn't sure what that was. So it's a short story. Amazing.
It's just a short story. Yeah, they're called quick reads. And what they're trying to do is encourage adults to get back into reading, or certainly people who find it difficult reading. The style sheet's very restrictive, so it's easy to keep with the story, and there's not too many multi-syllable words, and it's trying to encourage readers back.
Wow.
Bollywood have come and they said, well, we want to turn it into a film. We're going, yeah, be great. Do we have elephants? I hope so. I hope so.
That's fantastic.
I love Bollywood. It's great.
That's amazing. And then is that because you've done a lot of foundation work also with charities and getting people to read, and it's the reading agency. Is that one that you were involved with?
Yeah, the reading agency. It's, the reason I weren't flying helicopters as I thought I was going to be in the army was, it was only when I got to the junior leaders battalion that I was told that the reason that we were all there was that we all had the reading ages of between a 9 and an 11-year-old. Huh. And the interesting thing, which was, it was my fault because I just didn't care about school. But the interesting thing, that within the military as a whole in the UK, education is amazing. It's the biggest adult education setup in Europe. It's incredible. So they say, well, this is what we do. We all read and write here. So what we're going to do is start to read and write, because the only reason you can't read and write is because you don't. Wow. So we're going to do that now. And you go, yeah, okay, because you're in the army now. And that's how it all started. So I started doing stuff within the military because the numeracy and literacy is still, particularly in the infantry, that's why they're there, is still low. So started in infantry, and then it spread out into sort of schools and prisons and that sort of stuff. Because obviously because I was incarcerated when I was young as a teenager, within this Borstal system, I go into prisons and talk to prisoners, because our biggest occupational group in prisons are ex-military guys. Okay. So it's going in and saying, look, use this time to get this education up, and so at least you can get out there and maybe compete.
Wow, that is incredible. And in 2003, did you go back to Iraq? Is that right?
Yeah.
You went back to the place where the guys went and put a memorial.
Went back. Yeah, I was asked to go back, and I became an advisor to our Ministry of Defence here for on and off for about 10 years. Going back to Iraq, and then obviously when the commitment in Afghanistan started, and basically it's because of the sort of relationship I've got with the infantry. And again, like all infantrymen, they're all sort of young guys, sort of 18 to 21 sort of thing, got a good sort of relationship with them. What it was trying to work out was what were the immediate operational requirements for the infantry. And it was all the silly stuff, that gets lost in the mix, but really, really important to an infantry guy. So even the Osprey body armor system didn't have quick release straps to get it off quickly, and 2 guys drowned in the canals in the green zone in Afghanistan because they couldn't get them off in time. So it's trying to go back to the MOD and say, look, this is what the people need today, now, and this is how we can do it, and try and bits, little attachments for weapons, and just to make life easier for the infantry guys. So it would go backwards and forwards. I don't know, sort of once, sometimes twice a year for these trips to, get out on the ground, but, go on the patrols with them, because after the requirements, they don't really need. They just think, well, let's see if we can get it. But actually, it's what we can get you now that really going to help. It was really good, actually. I really enjoyed it.
And one of those trips, don't you go to a memorial where the SAS guys put up something for?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, there's on the bank of the Euphrates where the guy Dinger and Steve Lane, the 2 guys who crossed the Euphrates who tried to escape. So basically, at the end of the major onslaught, as soon as Baghdad was taken, so special air services were operating in that area, just coming down south of Al Qaim. So they built that Khan, and what they done, they booby trapped it, put an IEDs in, and made sure everybody knew. Jeez. So that's why it was still standing.
Amazing. Yeah. That is incredible.
Yeah.
What did it feel like to go back to that spot?
Yeah, it was quite strange, actually. It was so we went back to Al Qaim, obviously to that spot, trying to work out exactly on the border where I was captured. I sort of got an idea. It wasn't exact, but obviously the camp, the military location in Al Qaim was now obviously that had been overtaken. Now there was civilians living in it now. All the ironwork had been taken out, and it's people were sort of making the best they can there, and then went back to Baghdad, to the interrogation center that had been turned into a holding center by an American cavalry unit. Actually, they were using that as a holding center for insurgents, for Iraqi insurgents. So that was interesting, going back in there into the interrogation rooms, because they're exactly what you would expect. There's hooks in the walls, there's all that sort of stuff. Because of the war with Iran, all of the interrogations had to be physical, because they couldn't play mind games with these guys. They just had to get in there and grip them physically for information.
Jeez, what did it feel like going back to that spot?
That was strange. Yeah. That was strange, actually, because I was trying to work out, because obviously always blindfolded, handcuffed. After a while, I could work out the steps and, going across the open ground and all that. So I could work out what the cell that I was in and the corner I was in.
Incredible.
And, interestingly, there was more bloodstains there now, obviously, because they've had their own sort of internal problems. And you used to go past in a corridor, and I used to bump against metallic objects as I was getting pushed through. And what I discovered, they were freezers. And the unit that had taken over the area, they said they brought out about 14 bodies out of the freezers.
Jeez.
When they overtook it, because the guys, what they were doing during interrogation, they died. They just put them in a freezer.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah.
That is absolutely incredible. And I before I let you go, I mean, I sincerely appreciate you spending all this time with me. It's such an honor. As this week, right now, and this will publish in a week or two or three, but we're watching Afghanistan, and we're watching this disaster as we had 20 years to prepare to leave, and now it looks like what it looks like, and we're all watching it real time. What are your thoughts on that withdrawal, especially coming from the UK perspective of 3 incursions in the 19th and early 20th century into Afghanistan, and then being right there fighting alongside of U.S. forces for the last 20 years. And then all of a sudden the U.S. deciding to, 1, leave, and then 2, do it in a way that looks like we could not have done it worse if we had been actively trying to make every mistake possible. What are you thinking as you watch all this transpire?
Yeah, it is. I think it's on 2 levels, really, isn't it? It's obviously the emotional level, where there's, all that blood that's been spent, really trying to do the right thing. So, at that sort of really sort of infantry level, schools opened, medical care, all those sort of things, and sort of troops getting emotionally involved with that within the Afghans, and and training the ANA, the Afghan National Army, getting ready to take over. So there's all that emotional thing where, one of the, if you like, the problems with a democracy is that you've got, the politicians where they don't have friends, they have interests. So countries are interests, they're not friends. So our interest now has gone. So what that leaves is that emotional level of people that are, not only dead, all that blood spill, but actually, the people that are both physically and mentally suffering, because we have exactly the same problems as US veterans, veterans have, with obviously the injuries and the aspect of PTSD. So we have those sort of problems where people think, well, was it all worth it? But interestingly, it's from a practical sense, I'm thinking, okay, well, because of the Doha Agreement, we knew it was going to happen. So the way it's happened, nobody wanted that way. However, you've got the Afghan political and the military leadership not pulling their weight. And why on earth would the Afghan military then start to pull their weight? So if there's no will to actually fight for their own country, this is one of the reasons why the Taliban's come in so quickly, because there hasn't been that resistance as we thought it was going to happen. So, but that's the practicalities, where we are where we are. The interesting thing now is to see what the Taliban will do. Obviously, there's all nice words at the moment. That remains to be seen. But on that whole thing of the great game and the reason why the Brits were there, and, from sort of, the 19th century onwards, part of that great game. Taliban are already talking to the Chinese. They're promising big infrastructure situations. Chinese embassy hasn't closed down. Yeah. The Russian embassy hasn't closed down. They're still operating because they're still talking, because they're looking at filling that void. And maybe the bigger problem will be what happens when that void is filled by those countries as opposed to the West, which remains to be seen, really, isn't it? But it is a problem. It's a big problem.
Yeah. So tough to watch. So tough to watch. And
very much so.
Before I let you go, so Bravo 20, absolutely incredible. Immediate action. 7 Troop, you wrote a little later, and then of course the Nick Stone series, Tom Buckingham series, everything you have going on. But Bravo 20 made such an impact on an entire generation of those who go stand up to defend their countries. But there's this one I've never forgotten the last line, which is absolutely brilliant, and I just want to read that because from first read to today, it's never left me. And you write, this is the very end in the epilogue, and you say, "And as for the people who interrogated me, if I met any of them in the street tomorrow and thought I could get away with it, I'd slot them."
Yeah.
Awesome. That's the best line to a novel.
It's true.
It's not a novel. I mean, this is nonfiction, of course.
Yeah.
So the best
true.
line, ending line ever, in my humble opinion.
Thank you for
it's
that.
fantastic. Yeah, it's complete. It's totally brilliant. So, and I love it, and it resonated with me because I know it's true.
Certainly is.
Oh, amazing. Well, Andy, thank you so much for spending all this time with me. It means so much to me. As I said, you're an inspiration on and off the battlefield to so many of us, and love what you're doing. And I'll keep following and keep reading. And if you ever need anything, please reach out. I am standing by.
Certainly will. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been good.
Awesome.
Really good. Really enjoyed it.
Welcome to the gear highlight section of the Danger Close podcast. All right, got a very cool box here from True Velocity. Look at that. Nice. So what is in here, you might ask? Oh, look at that. That's some pretty cool packaging. Awesome. Ammunition made perfect. I am true technology. I am true revolution. I am true science. I am a true warrior. I am true perfection. I am true velocity. That's pretty sweet. All right. Oh, that's cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Very cool. And what is in here? I'm guessing it's ammo. Nice. Wow. All right. I'll pull this out here. So check this out. Wow. I'm going to be checking this out. They've invited me down to go check out the factory, see what they're all about. And I am looking forward to that as soon as I finish writing book 5. But yeah, this is awesome. My buddy Donnie Vincent has been shooting these for a while. And look at that. It's pretty awesome. So definitely want to check this out and spend a little more time seeing what these guys have going on. But man, I know Donnie is a big fan, which means a lot to me. So, man, True Velocity, thank you for sending, and looking forward to sending some of these down range and getting out to see you guys. So, thanks again. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by 6 Hour. Pick up any of Andy McNabb's books, Bravo 20, Immediate Action, 7 Troop, Red Notice, wherever you get your books. Follow me on the social channels at Jack Carr USA or at officialjackcarr.com. The merch is at jackcarrusa.com. If you liked our conversation, please leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. Until the next time, take care out there. Be safe. Stay strong. Keep fighting.